Okay, so we go ahead. So in this class, so we try to go into further details about what is evaluation, okay, and try to distinguish, make a kind of distinction between evaluation and other, okay, things that could be confused with evaluation, like assessment, okay. So, and in addition to other things like kinds of criteria, okay, how evaluation and why evaluation should be like systematic, okay, because as we're going to see from the very beginning, in everyday life we are engaged in evaluation, right? Every day when we are speaking, when we are talking, when we are engaged in our everyday life, we are also engaged into evaluation. But this kind of evaluation usually is kind of unsystematic, right? You do it spontaneously and then you just try to evaluate randomly, right? The teacher is not well dressed today, the teacher is tired today, the teacher has got something today, things like this, like for the teachers, okay? But the same thing goes on when you go into shopping, of course, when you go into doing whatever you do. It's a cafe. The first thing you can be engaged in, usually maybe mostly in our Moroccan context, people are mostly these days evaluating. Don't you think so? At every level, politics and everybody is then becoming an expert and trying to evaluate. Yeah, that's what I'm telling you, especially in Morocco these days, okay? These days, especially as well. Because by comparison to maybe 5 years or maybe more years ago, yeah, there was evaluation, but not to this extent. Okay, today it's so much exaggerated. So we try to see how we are engaged in evaluation, right, everyday life, but when it comes to education, and doing evaluation to take decisions in relation to education, we shouldn't do it just the same way. It should be done in a kind of systematic way. And when we talk about a kind of systematic way, we're talking about criteria, okay, procedures. There should be well-established procedures and well-established criteria. And we'll have a look at some of the approaches for doing evaluation. There are mainly 3 approaches, so we'll talk about first, second, and then the third one. So we'll try to go into the details of evaluation, okay? And during the process of the lecture today, I will try to engage you in some kind of tasks, whereby just to show you how, issues related to evaluation. So, the first thing we have to distinguish is between evaluation and, of course, testing or assessment. Okay? Testing or assessment, it can be done during the course or it can be done at the end of course. Usually at the end of the course, okay? Why? What's the purpose of assessment? Why do you want to do assessment? Why do you want to do a testing for your students when they are, yes?
To take information about their actual level.
Yes.
And was the teaching, were they influenced by the teaching?
Yes, were they learning? In other words,
maybe to measure the level of fluency.
yes, fluency, accuracy. In general, let's call it this way, to measure their levels of achievement. Okay, to measure their levels of achievement in terms of learning what you have been teaching them, all right? Yes, please. So, but testing is only one part, okay, of evaluation. Evaluation is more general than just testing. However, testing is only one component in the evaluation process. And we will show you an example, which we will discuss, whereby a school moves on from one kind of approach to another different kind of approach in terms of textbooks, in terms of curriculum, etc. Moving from a structural approach to teaching English to a more communicative approach to teaching English. Okay? And then when they test the results of the students, in terms of assessment, in terms of testing, they found that the students in the previous structural approach, they used to fail, many more failures. But when they do the more communicative approach, there is more success. Okay? But then, is this the way how you can evaluate that the structural approach was the reason, or the communicative approach was the reason? So we'll try to discuss this, okay, and see how testing or the results of the students in terms of testing and assessment is not the main way how you can determine or evaluate a program, a curriculum, okay? Evaluation is crucial in teaching and learning, okay? Because that's why there is testing. Testing is one part of evaluation, one component. So there is testing, okay? There are other ways of testing in order to see how things are going on. The teaching practices, the learning practices, okay? And then, of course, the achievements, okay? It provides a wealth of information to use for the future direction of classroom practice. There are changes, okay? Things are changing. And the teacher, the administration, the pedagogical staff in general is always engaged in testing new approaches, new measures. Why? Because they want to achieve better. Because they want their students to achieve better and to improve the teaching and learning processes, right? This is what goes on in high school or in our national schools, right? So every time we have new approaches, new methods, new textbooks, and so on and so forth. The same thing for the university. New reform and the reform of the reform, and so on and so forth. Because we want to improve education. Because we want to improve teaching and learning. And we're going to see that in one of the sections of this lecture, that the way how, for example, talking about our Moroccan context, and this is not only relevant to Moroccan context, it's relevant to all other contexts, okay? Whereby whenever there is a new movement or a new innovation, a new change in terms of procedures, teaching and learning procedures, education, etc., it's not handled in appropriate ways. It's not done in appropriate ways. We're going to see first, for example, that usually things come from above and then imposed into the teachers and the students, right? And usually the teachers don't know what to do. They don't know how to proceed with the new approach because they don't have the training. What happens in that regard? They usually either do it with mistakes or they don't do it. They just do other things because they don't understand how to do it, okay? So therefore, there could be problems, issues, okay, in terms of bringing out innovation. So we will see that there are better ways, as we're going to see later on, for introducing innovation, okay, into the classroom setting, into schools in general. So it provides a wealth of information to use for the future direction of classroom practice. So it helps us to improve the teaching and learning practices. So that's why evaluation is crucial. And also for the planning of courses, okay? So yeah, making decisions for planning courses, okay? You want to teach courses, okay? So you have to do evaluation in order to do that appropriately. And of course, for the management in general, for the management of learning tasks and students. So this is why evaluation is so important, right? Okay, in education. So what is evaluation then? Why do you want to evaluate something? What do you want to evaluate in terms of schools, learners, examinations? So because we said last class that we can focus on different levels. Either we can focus on the curriculum, we can focus on the teacher styles, etc. So we can focus on the schools, the learners, examinations. Evaluation is not at all restricted to the context of education. Okay? So this is just to bring you to the issue I have raised in the very beginning, where I told you that evaluation is something we do in everyday life. So forget now about education and let's see how, okay, discuss this, okay? So it is part of everyday lives. So as a kind of task to, to discuss this, for you. Okay? Take a typical day in your life. Typical day. So, first question for you here is what sort of things outside your work, no, everyday life, when we're talking about, I'm not talking about teaching, okay? So just normal everyday life, in front of a tagine, for example, yes? That's, okay? What sort of things outside your workstation do you make informal, evaluative statements about? What sort of things outside of your work do you make informal, evaluative statements about? Something you always, you know, some people have tendencies. People have tendencies. People have tendency to evaluate something more than other things, depending on their interests. For example, people who love music, people who love movies, people who love whatever, tagines, people who love, okay, etc. So you evaluate things depending on your level or your interest. So what kind or what sorts of things do you make informal evaluative statements about? Now think about your working day, shift to experience. What sorts of evaluations now, supposedly you have started training a bit and you have been doing peer teaching, of course. So what sorts of evaluations do you make about your learners, their work or your teaching? So take a few minutes to think about these. Let's focus on the first one and then we will move to the second one. Okay? One thing, okay, not more. One thing, okay, not more, because we are going to have a variety of things. So. Okay, okay, everybody. Yes, Yessi?
We got personal.
Yeah, we're talking about personal, okay, yeah, of course.
For example, I avoid the service in a restaurant or food, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, for example, if I go to pizza restaurant from time to time. So I tend to evaluate, for example,
For sure.
quality of food,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
service,
Mhm.
also the waiting time, for example.
Mhm.
Whether, for example, I waited too longer than, for example, last time. So.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Waiting for the service to come, yes. Other points? Yes?
Maybe the weather.
Yes.
Weather sometimes at times in Agadir you have very bad weather. This is an evaluation. And at other times you have very nice one.
Yes, yes. Weather, we are always engaged in evaluation of weather, yes?
Well, generally my focus goes to women. I mean,
To
women.
Women, okay.
I mean, I evaluate how they think nowadays, how how they change over time, to what extent they have, to what extent they have been aware about certain decisions in their lives.
You maybe look forward to sharing some of your findings with us in that regard. Yes?
For example, Moroccan movies. For example, if you watch an Asian movie, Korean or Japanese movie, and you compare it with Moroccan movie, you find a huge difference.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Yes.
Work.
Yes. Yeah. So this is one area where we have, as Moroccans, very much involved into evaluation in relation to Moroccan movies, and maybe in relation to everything Moroccan, to some extent. Yes.
Well, personally, because usually spend much of my time commuting with work on
Yes.
so
Yes.
I tend to evaluate the behaviors of drivers in the route waiting drive.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Do we, evaluate to what extent people are punctual? Because you're Moroccan people actually.
Yes. One of the areas we can evaluate. We are always evaluating. Yes. I totally agree with you, Ikram. For example, today you came first, while the others came late. Yes.
Actually, I usually avoid the behavior of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I took friends in my life.
Yes.
I see the ones as
Okay, good. Do you know the hypocritic ones? Do you know them? Because usually those people are difficult to know, you know? Yeah. That's why they are hypocrites, okay? Yeah, maybe some other.
Professional ones.
Huh?
Professional ones are
Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah. Yeah. Other, yes, Yasin?
Sometimes I tend to evaluate the quality of the news on this end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you watch the news and then
Yes. I agree with you.
no quality.
I
Just
remember.
to fill in the
Yes.
like just that gap,
Mm-hmm.
the news time during the news, they just try to cut whatever news and then.
This is an issue, as I told you in the very beginning, and as I told Rahma right now. Everything Moroccan, we are engaged into very critical evaluation, not constructive evaluation. Okay. Anyway, so because it's Akhloush, another.
Maybe one of the things which is very widely criticized in Morocco is communicative.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
He
Yeah.
did well, he did not do well, and so on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. So this is just a kind of way, okay, to show how evaluation is part of our everyday life. But of course, as we will see, there is a difference when it comes to evaluation in education. Okay. Now, can you take some time and you bear in mind, of course, your experience as novice teachers, peer teaching, and maybe now the WIN training? What sort of evaluations do you make about your learners, work and teaching? Let's take, the three of them. What kind of evaluation? Especially that you have provided your portfolio. So take some time, okay, think about this. 1 or 2 points maximum. Okay? Yeah? Yasin?
Well, plus for evaluate whether, for example, students are behaving well. It's about discipline.
Are not or are?
Are or not.
Uh-huh.
For example, if there's discipline, sometimes because
Never perfect.
yeah, students tend, for example, to behave in different ways from a class to another.
Mm-hmm.
And also, for example, the engagement of students in the lessons, whether they participate more or less. So it's participation and discipline.
Yes, so these are the two main areas for evaluation for your, okay, yeah, yeah, you have in mind. Yes?
I think that evaluation in classroom, for example, has a purpose. The purpose of the teacher is to help students to improve. But for example, our daily life, the evaluation is just for the sake of evaluation.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to come to this, how are the evaluations 1 and 2 similar or different. But what's for you, the things you evaluate, you focus on in evaluation, it's sort of teaching, yes?
Student skills, for example, writing.
So it's kind of assessment.
Yes.
Assessment?
Yeah.
What about teaching practices? Okay. Yeah? Jonas?
I think it's more related to from me, evaluation is more an instrument to evaluate in my teaching or something like that is elicitation techniques, using questions to promote students.
So you usually engage in evaluating your skills as a teacher in terms of doing these elicitation techniques, okay? Aziz?
Maybe sometimes you engage in a self-reflective process. You reflect upon your teaching, practice, way things, way things. Do you think about things? Sometimes you compare your performance with others colleagues, what you see, what you, for example, has done this, or you hasn't done this. Sometimes you reflect upon things. From the testing materials, sometimes the results, you get information, what went well, what didn't, what needs more work.
Now also think about the how you do the two. While you are giving answers, think about the how you do the evaluation in everyday life and the how you do evaluation for classroom and teaching and learning. You know, because we are going to come to this question, how are the evaluations in 1 and 2 similar or different? Yes?
Well, so in addition to what as mentioned about the evaluating knowledge and practice, I think one of the ways that we tend to do as teachers is that we tend to compare the way you deliver a certain lesson to one class in comparison to another class. And we tend to improve the way we give lessons by doing such comparison.
Yes.
And another idea of evaluation that we tend to do at school is we tend to evaluate to work with the administration. To what extent the administration, for example, provides necessary equipment for teachers. To what extent they control students in the school yards.
Yes. Right. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Nadia?
The evaluation of in our daily is, I think that it's internal. So the evaluation now in order to ourselves or to have like a personal view about something. But for the education, it's more for external purposes, for like administration purposes and so on. So and when we evaluate in education, we evaluate according to some criteria that we put already in our education, but for example, in our everyday life, sometimes we just evaluate without having a previous.
Yes. Yeah, okay. That's exactly one answer for, clear answer for the last question. How are the evaluations in 1 and 2? Different, okay? Different, okay? So, let's continue with the final answer for number 2. Yes, Afalush?
Maybe generally we tend to evaluate our lessons whether they were successful or not, and this has a direct impact on the following class. Sometimes I have 2 back classes. I teach the first one, and I see that something was not really working, and then I change certain things, and I find that in the second class I did better than the first one. For example.
Anything common that you always find you change and then it works?
Sometimes I found that an activity, for example, was too much difficult. I designed it.
So in terms of difficulty,
so I tried to make it easier or to find ways
adapt it.
to adapt it.
This is usual. Okay, good. Now, concerning the last question, how are the evaluations in 1 and 2 similar or different? So, yes.
I think that evaluation for the first time evaluation of communication, it is structured and focused and very
Yes. Yes.
For example, a schedule, but in everyday life, you may just it's randomly and
Yes, that's exactly the difference between the two, right? So not necessarily how.
Yeah, because sometimes when you evaluate your student, you do it inconsistently.
Yes, this is the one kind of common thing usually teachers do in terms of evaluation, but we will see that it can be done better ways. Okay, usually teachers do evaluation just the same way they do evaluation in everyday life. But the point here to raise is that it should be done in more systematic ways. Okay, the best systematic way, as we're going to see, and approach used in this regard is what is referred to as action research. And action research, you can use observation, audio record, video record, checklist, things like this. So in order to make it systematic, rather than just keeping it in the air, in mind, okay, spontaneous, okay. So evaluation is a natural activity, part of a human being. It can be very formal or informal, as we have seen. Formal when it goes to education, etc. Informal when it goes to everyday life. It may be done unconsciously rather than being explicit. This is usually the case for everyday life, and usually many teachers do it this way, unconsciously, not explicitly, implicitly rather than explicitly. We are constantly making evaluations of one kind or another, constantly. We modify our behavior or ask others to modify their behavior accordingly. Okay? So this is the some of the ideas in this regard. Ill-prepared, ad hoc, now because we are moving from the kind of evaluation we do in everyday life towards evaluation in education. So ill-prepared, ad hoc evaluations are likely to be unreliable because we are talking about education, talking about formal context, very sensitive context, serious context, unfair and uninformative. Making decisions about a teacher at work in the classroom will involve, so we are moving from spontaneous, informal towards formal, systematic, okay, will involve a different set of evaluation criteria from those needed to evaluate a set of learning tasks. An evaluation of teacher performance will also be structured differently from an analysis of learner performance. If you remember, we talked about the fact that in evaluation we can focus on different things. We can focus on the curriculum, we can focus on the materials, we can focus on the teaching process, we can focus on the learning process, we can focus on the classroom discourse, and so on and so forth. So every time you can have different focus. So that's why in education you need to specify, to have criteria for each type of focus you are dealing with. Okay? So that's why making decisions about a teacher at work in the classroom will involve a different set of evaluation criteria from those needed to evaluate a set of learning tasks. So if you want to focus on the teacher, different from if you want to focus on the learner. Okay? An evaluation of teacher performance will also be structured, teacher performance, if you want to evaluate the teacher performance. So of course it's going to be structured differently from if you want to focus on the analysis of the learner performance. Okay? So you can have different things. So therefore, systematicity and organization and criteria need to be determined carefully. The implications of evaluation in an educational setting are far more powerful than those we make in formal social settings. This is one of the differences between evaluation in everyday life and formal education setting. Okay? The decisions we make in everyday life are not really vital or that very, crucial, But when it comes to education, it's very crucial. Careful thought. Therefore, this is the reason why we need to be careful about doing evaluation in education. We need to organize ourselves, to put things in a systematic way, to establish criteria, to determine objectives, and so on and so forth. Careful thought should be done to make explicit what it is we are evaluating. The same is applicable for the criteria by which we judge whether something is very good, adequate, or inadequate. So criteria, because you're talking about judgment, so you need to determine your terminology. What do you mean by very good, adequate, and inadequate? Okay, what is very good, adequate, inadequate in terms of determining the objectives, right? Evaluation in an educational context should be systematic. So this is the conclusion. And undertaken according to certain guiding principles using carefully defined criteria. This is the gist of all what we have said so far. Evaluation in educational context should be systematic, organized, and should be done according to some well-established principles, guiding principles, and of course, well-defined criteria. Okay? Now we're going to move into the details in the following lectures today and in the following lectures. Assessment has a much more limited perspective with a focus on the ends. Now, coming back to the story of difference between testing, assessment, and evaluation. Assessment has a much more limited perspective with a focus on the ends, because assessment and testing, you focus simply on the ends of learning and students' achievements. Okay? That's what you focus on. You don't deal with the teaching practices. You don't deal with the learning practices. You don't deal with the student talking time, teacher talking time, these issues. You don't deal with the curriculum. You don't deal with the syllabus, the materials. Okay? So you focus only one thing. It is the students' achievements. Evaluation is seen as a means analysis. Evaluation is different from assessment in the sense that it is seen as a means analysis. What do we mean by as a means analysis? Evaluation examines teachers' language teaching methods. You remember, focus on different types of focus. It can be examining teachers' language teaching methodology or methods, teaching materials, effectiveness, how materials are presented, types of learning tasks, and how teachers design their courses. So you see that testing and testing and assessment is a very limited aspect or scope of evaluation. And evaluation is more general, okay? It focuses on different things in relation to the classroom setting. I told you the story of a school, okay, as an example here, to see to discuss the issue of how evaluation education should be systematic, organized, determined, etc. So change from a structural approach to a more communicative one. So this is the example of a school which changed from this kind of approach, which is structural, focuses on the structure, to another approach which focuses on communication, right? Communicative approach. Now the results after, of course, doing adopting the two approaches, in relation to the communicative course or the communicative approach when it was adopted, the learners passed the test. Average score like 59%. This is an example, okay? And then the structural course, or after adopting the structural approach, the learners fail the test and average score is 45%. So you see the difference. More success after adopting the communicative approach, and less success, more failure after adopting the structural approach. Communicative teaching and learning program this is what we're going to see. One of the ways we can think of as helping us to evaluate the program is to see the results. This is usually what happens, okay?
To compare between the objectives and the result. Like the discrepancy.
Yes, let's call it between the approaches and the results adopted or we have in the two approaches. Usually what happens is that teachers, administration, they just focus on the students' results, achievements. And they say, yes, the approach is good. Okay? This led to a better result. But is this the only interpretation? This is a question for you as well. What do you think about this way of analyzing the value of an approach on the basis of the student's result? Do you think it's enough, or do you think it's fine as a measure for evaluating each approach, or should we evaluate other things, adopt other things into our evaluation scheme? What do you think? You answered my question, right? Okay? Do you think that take into consideration the student's result is enough for judging the value of an approach, of a program? Yes, Nadia?
I think it's not enough because we use contact when we evaluate, we don't evaluate everything that we have.
For sure, yeah. So what did we ignore here?
We ignore, so I think it's the process itself is
For sure, that's right. The process itself is ignored. What process you mean?
the process that is taken by the teacher.
Teachers. So the teaching and learning processes. Okay, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, I think the implication that we come to based on the results, not enough to make a decision whether, for example, cognitive approach is better than the structured approach, because other factors or other criteria are ignored here.
Yes. What are these other factors or
For
criteria?
example, there could have been, for example, an observation of the both teaching style or both approaches. Also, students.
So the teaching styles. Okay. Yeah.
Students' opinions, for example, and everybody who is like
Learning process.
Yes. So that we can have like
for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yes.
I think another factor that may contribute here to this difference in terms of the results of students is the type of tests that have been taken. Okay, so maybe the tests that the students who have been taught through the structural approach was more difficult.
Yes.
Okay.
So another reason. Yeah. Yes.
And the one that was taken by the ones who worked on through
The validity of the test, the reliability of the tests. This is another issue. Okay, the tests, you know that these tests are always problematic. So we have just heard another example here, in the sense that activities or tests can be difficult, therefore the results can be low. So the validity and the reliability of the test is an issue as well. That's questions, puts a big question mark on the interpretation. Yes, Aziz?
We also consider the course content, for example.
Yes?
It's too overloaded in the structural approach.
Yes, the rate, the pace.
And also the result we see whether really becomes a result of the communicative approach or from other external sources, for example, language centers.
There could be other variables into this. Maybe the students, after adopting the communicative approach, their input was much higher for English, okay? English input, okay? Higher. But in such an approach, maybe they didn't have that input in terms of going to centers, to, extra hours, etc. Yes?
We talk about evaluating the efficiency of instruction, like given during the program. Was the result of the students or students' learning, was it thanks to the efficiency of instruction or thanks to other variables?
Yes, so you are dealing here with the teaching practices, okay? The teaching practices, in the sense the teacher, did he deliver clear, precise instructions, simple, precise, or vice versa, occur a difference? Yes? Naima.
I'm going to disagree with you all.
Yes, no problem. Go ahead. You're welcome.
Because all my friends have mentioned the process, the content, and
Yes.
all that fun in one body, which is does the student gain the knowledge? Is this or not?
Does the student get the knowledge?
Yes, the knowledge. So in order to know that, we need to test him, and depending on his or her scores, from that we can evaluate if that you say the approach we use is working or not. There is no other way. I think for something is good or to evaluate that approach.
There is no way how you can evaluate an approach.
The appropriate one is the scores.
You think that this is the best one?
Yes.
Yes, this is your opinion.
Yes.
Okay. One opinion among many other opinions. Okay. So, yes? What do you think?
I think we are talking here about different methods. Since we are talking about structural and communicative approaches, the course content is different. So, which means that we cannot rely on the test result, on the results of the exam to say whether this approach is better, because they are always different from the beginning. And that is different.
Yes, it is different.
So maybe the first one is based on grammar and vocabulary and so on, but the other is based on communication.
Good. So this is a good opportunity since many hands are being raised. We're going to move on to a task to to make this organized, okay, systematic. Okay. So you have two questions again. Do you think that the evaluation results provide any evidence that the communicative program works? So take your time. Take your time to deal with this and to provide answer. And then number two, what other factors do you think could account for these results? You have talked about inputs. You have talked about teaching instructions. Okay, so can you take some time to think about these two questions? Provide your answers, and then we will discuss it further in detail. Okay. Okay. Okay, a few points. So, the first one, do you think that the evaluation results provide evidence? So Marima, you already said your point. Yes, the answer is yes. Yes. No problem. Yes. Okay. Yes, so not only to measure, the answer is no. Not only, it's not enough just to focus on these results of students' achievements too. Okay?
Is one way of
One way.
yes. So don't say it's a disagreement.
No, yeah, that's right.
Okay, it's one way, but there are other variables maybe that should be taken into account.
Yes. We're going to come to number two, okay? Because remember, we are moving from taking evaluations in our everyday life and how it's just spontaneous and needs to be, not only nice, but when we move into education, things need to be well determined, organized, systematic, okay? Maybe this is one way of how things are not systematic if you just focus on the student's achievements. Yeah, it's one way. But is it enough? That's the question. Not enough, as we see. Okay?
Well, evaluation is a scientific process. So whenever there's evaluation, people tend to criticize or.
So what is your answer? Yes.
There should be people keep asking like about the quality and reliability of the evaluation. So if we opt only for the students' results, then we affect both the validity and reliability for such an evaluation. So other things should be taken into consideration to convince other people.
Yes.
Because people will say that maybe the students did achievement maybe because not for other factors which were not there.
Yes.
So you need to convince people to provide more proof.
Yes.
Yeah, to some extent it is, because at the
To
end,
some extent, yes.
we rely on the results.
Yes.
At the end, we need tangible evidence.
Yes.
Especially for like administration or to make decisions, we need something to rely on.
Yes.
But if we just evaluate in the air,
Yeah, of course. So, but that's the question now.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, for me, I think that results cannot take into consideration are the only source of maybe
Yes, for sure. It's one part of the evaluation.
Yeah, especially that we are talking about a communicative approach
Yeah.
in which we should take other variables into consideration, such as interaction of the teacher with the student or students and interaction.
Other variables should be taken into account. Last.
Yes, I think we can accept as a criteria of results in case the criteria of evaluation are respected. For example, the reliability and validity criteria are.
For the test itself.
Yes. For example, if this evaluation is done in the same context, with the same school and the same students, okay? So in this case, we can accept the result as reliable.
Okay. Yes. Good. So, in order to, one way of reducing the risk of relying on just tests is making the tests very reliable and valid, okay, not too difficult, etc. Now, so the question now, how many of you think it's enough? Raise your hand. Just to focus on tests. Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah. So that's the. Now let's move on into examples of other factors that need to be incorporated and taken into account, in addition to, of course, tests. So, for example, yes.
The way students were assessed. Like we evaluate the procedures of evaluation themselves.
Testing.
Yes.
Procedures of testing. So, it's related to what's said. Yes.
In addition to which one I mentioned earlier, also the learning material, for example, textbooks. We can compare between the structured approach and the communicative approach. From the side where, for example, such a textbook covering all the skills, the language skills, or just focusing on the accuracy level of the forms.
Yes. Okay. Good. Yes.
And also, this course is another
Yes.
which should be taken into account. The students have an opportunity to start for a language, for example, when it comes for a sport, for example, in FPS, they can do well. They can do instruction well, but when it comes to communication, they will find themselves kind of like they cannot speak or something like that.
Yes.
Maybe one of the variables that will affect this is whether the program meets students' needs, interests, preferences, and learning styles, and so on.
Yes. Other variables.
I think we can use at least 3 factors. Some that has to do with the learner himself, the motivation, for example. Some that has to do with the classroom environment and the materials used. And some that has to do with the teacher.
Yes.
Teacher instruction.
So these are other variables that have not been dealt with into this testing. Yeah? Because we're going to see later, the tests have been done, but does it mean that the communicative approach was used in class? How sure can you be about that? Yes, the the curriculum or maybe the textbook, yes, communicative approach. But the teacher, teachers are always, did he adopt the communicative approach in teaching? That's all, yeah, forget about testing, okay? But not just teaching here, or testing in relation to the achievements, okay? Now, did he do that? Or just use the old method structural and focus about stuff? So that's why we need to go into seeing these things, okay? In addition, of course, to the tests.
Also, we can talk about the way different approaches perceive this in itself. For example, typically structural approach is this is for written tests. But in communicative, there are different ways of things. Or the projects, portfolios, and then we just written this.
Yes.
This can be also
These are other variables.
Let's suppose, for example, that teachers like adopting the content approach would like to defend their approach. So maybe they would design, for example, not challenging tests, but easy tests. That the students can get high grades. So they can, for example, convince people that here you are, here you find the grade, and so on. So the approach is a good one.
Yes.
So again, it's not really able to come up with some
Sure,
final
Yasin.
interpretation.
So the conclusion is that other variables might be involved, as you have mentioned, teachers' teaching styles, methodology, exposure to English outside, input, etc. And more, okay, you can think of in that regard. Hence, we need to consider alternative ways for evaluating, of course, courses. So that's why we need to go into those other variables that I mentioned in the very end of the previous slide. So without information gathered during the process of teaching, during the process of teaching, you need to gather information using observation instruments, using audio recording, using video recording, and checklists, and so on and so forth. So you are unable to say why learners have done better. Without information gathered during the process of teaching, if you don't have that information, you are unable to say why learners have done better. Okay? It's not enough just to focus on the results of the tests. Okay? The course may be communicative. The course, let's say the textbook or materials or whatever, may be communicative. But maybe the teaching itself is not communicative. Okay? Teachers maybe did not change their teaching methodology accordingly. They just use the old method to teach the new textbook. And usually this happens. Hence the need, therefore we need to resort to interviews, classroom observation, recording, video, audio recording, etc. Without these, one cannot be sure that any observed learner improvement is a result of changed classroom practice. Okay? Yes, you have the results. Better after communicative and less after structural. But the reason, the main reason, is this because of the communicative approach, or so we have to go into other aspects of teaching practices in order to justify why exactly they did better there or less in other places. The issue of the process versus the product of teaching and learning. The process of learning is more crucial in evaluation. So you have the product, that's the teacher or the student's achievements, is like the product, okay? But the process is more important. Okay? So the issue of process versus the product. Okay? So the focus in evaluation, yes, you should deal with the product, with the tests, be careful about those, how you do them, validity, reliability. But you have to go further into investigating the process itself. So the process of learning is more crucial in evaluation. Okay? Now the reasons for evaluation, and here we'll talk about innovation versus change. So there are two reasons for evaluation. The first one is, as it is put in the title of the slide there, confirming the validity of classroom practice. What do we mean by that? To explain and confirm existing procedures. That's to say, the teaching style, the instructions, the classroom discourse. Were they efficient, reliable, good for teaching and learning? So to explain and confirm existing procedures. Confirming the validity of classroom practice. Is it good work the teachers are doing? The methodology is good? The syllabus, the pace, and so on and so forth. To justify existing practice through an explanation of what happens during the teaching and learning event. This is the main focus of evaluation. So confirming the validity of classroom practice. That's the first reason for doing evaluation. That is because we're talking about tests. Are they valid or reliable? Same thing for the teaching practices, teaching styles, methodology, textbooks, materials, and so on and so forth. We also talk about validity and reliability in that regard. So the purpose of evaluation is to see how valid those classroom teaching practices are valid. Another reason is to gain information to bring about innovation or change. So the first thing, you just want to see if the validity of the teaching practices. And the second one is to gain information in order to bring about, sorry, because I want to sneeze and then, innovation or change. Okay? Evaluation forming a basis for a subsequent change or modification within a curriculum. You want to investigate, to do evaluation because you want to do a change, new thing, innovate in the program, etc. The process of evaluation can often inform, now that's why again evaluation is important, because it can inform the nature and implementation of an innovation. If you want to do innovation, if you want to change, don't do it just, it is done in Morocco, they just bring things from up and then put it on you. Yes, execute, top down, okay, approach, without asking the people involved in the field, okay? So that's why evaluation can help in bringing innovation and change in better environment and better ways. Rather than bring about change in our teaching context in an unsystematic fashion. Also the issue of systematicity as well. Because if you want to do innovation, if you want to do change, okay, you need to be systematic, okay? So you have to collect data first, what's working, what's not working in terms of all variables, and then bring your innovation on the basis of the collected data. And of course, a systematic way. Now, this is a summary of the two reasons. So, is practice okay? Evaluation. Is practice okay? Yes. Confirm. And then, no, innovate. So, it's just kind of summarizing the two reasons of evaluation. Now, the criteria. We must be specific about the criteria used to judge classroom practices and materials. We should be able to clarify precisely what it is that leads you to dissatisfaction. Okay? There is dissatisfaction, teacher, student, parents, so dissatisfaction. But then what is exactly the reason for that dissatisfaction? Okay, so you need to go into criteria for evaluation and evaluation itself. In order to be successful about innovation, okay? So, now some of the issues that always faced when bringing innovation and change, there is first of all insufficient dialogue with the users of innovation before it is introduced. I remember when I first came to the university to teach university, at that time the very first reform was introduced. So I was teaching half old, half new. So, and most of the teachers, if not all, they didn't know about this modular system, semesters, validation, and how things work. So we were just, engaged into this reform, but we were not prepared for this reform, okay? Training or something like that. So insufficient dialogue. And first of all, before even that, did the ministry, of course, agree with the teachers? The teachers asked the teachers' opinions about if they want really to bring a reform? No, they didn't. They just imposed, okay? It was imposed. And of course, the same thing applies to high school, mid school, and primary school. There is insufficient dialogue with the users of the innovation before it is introduced.
One best example is,
Yes.
is this program of Masar, which was
Yes, yeah.
abruptly imposed on people by the end of the first semester. No one knew about it. And
Yeah.
it was imposed like that.
Yeah, and then you have problems, parents, students refusing it because they think that's going to harm their results, and teachers don't know how to use it, and the story goes on that way. Yes, yes, Ian?
And the point is the training.
Yes, the
With
training.
Masar, for example.
Yes, yeah, they didn't provide any training.
Yeah, if you play the administration, like last year I heard this, they had a training, but for teachers, no, they didn't have the training.
Yeah, the teacher. I'm talking about teachers now. That's the
This
must.
is the process, the results, there they need a training.
Yeah, of course, especially technology. So,
So it was like just a trial this year. It's
is it going on? Is it going on?
Yeah, it is applied. It's
Applied.
applied, whether people like it or not.
Or not? So that's one of the issues. A new set of tests may be imposed on teachers without adequate explanation as to how they are to be used or marked. So here we're talking about tests, but tests here just taken as an example. You can talk about using technology for recording the scores, or like Masar or whatever. So what happens is that it's imposed on teachers without adequate explanation as to how they are to be used or marked. Consequently, what happens is that the new system, okay, is not understood by some teachers and decide to have nothing to do with it. They just refuse it. Maybe you can't refuse. Many teachers don't refuse, but internally, personally, they refuse it, okay? I'm sure about that. Some may use the new testing procedures or whatever new procedures, I'm just taking as an example here, okay, testing procedures, and make mistakes about that because they don't grasp it, because they don't know how to deal with it. Okay? And of course, if you do mistakes in this education, of course, the future generations, of course, and the whole nation is at risk. They make mistakes and decide to return to old methods. Of course, when mistakes are, repetitive and more, so they decide, forget about this, and then, not formally, but informally, they do that, okay? Return to old methods. So those are some of the issues. The others may be reluctant to make adjustments to their current classroom practices and reject the innovation. That's the risk of doing or bringing about innovation in a kind of unsystematic way.
And this is maybe realized in the teachers who have already had a very long years of experience. So it's very hard for them when there is a new method or something which is new to change their old practices.
Yes.
That's why generally in
Yes.
urban areas, the majority of teachers are all kind of old-fashioned because they have already had a long experience. On the contrary, in rural areas, that's where they send the new teachers and they benefit. This is one of the advantages of the rural areas. They benefit from these new teachers who are
ready for innovation. Yeah. Concerning the better ways to introduce innovation, there are better ways how you can do that, how things can be done in terms of introducing evaluation, of course, innovation. There is one approach which is called like the research, development, and diffusion model. This is a model for evaluation and bringing in innovation. In this kind of approach or model, innovation is initiated by an agent external to the teaching situation, maybe international, okay, but not the teacher, not the ministry. A department of the Ministry of Education, or possibility. Department of Ministry of Education takes in charge doing that, sorry. With the occasional help of experts, outside experts, to assist with the innovation. So this is one approach, okay, whereby experts from outside or institution or, okay, do the innovation. And textbooks, not talking about Morocco, yeah, Morocco is somehow the same way, but in Morocco there is some kind of involvement of teachers, okay?
Yeah, sure.
There is some kind of involvement, but not very much. Still, it's not very much.
But still, the curriculum designers take into account the external stakeholders.
Yes,
And they
British
impose
Council.
the textbook writers what to include.
Yes,
That's what textbook
that's
writers are limited by
yeah.
what other people have already said.
So the first approach is adopted in terms of instructions criteria,
Yeah.
okay, and then into the bringing or producing the textbook, maybe involving teachers, inspectors, etc. The research development and diffusion model. Some more information. I'll give you some time to read this small paragraph. So, here are some further features of this model. So what do you have? External initiation, planning and management, directive style, poor access to information, high demands in terms of financial resources, money, minimal communication between the planners and the teachers. So those are some further characteristics of this approach. Another approach is, I prefer, the social interaction model or approach. Here, emphasis on user involvement. User involvement, that's the teachers, the students, with the teacher taking an active part in the innovation process. Teachers, relevant departments in Ministry of Education, university departments, all involved. Okay, so there's a kind of collective, collaborative work. Okay, collective, collaborative approach between the users and then the experts. Okay, so this is one better model, in my opinion, for the social. It's called the social interaction model. I give you this activity as a, as a task to differentiate between the previous model and this model. Okay, so you have examine the following characteristics of approaches to innovation. These are some characteristics, features, and then which of the characters above do you most identify with? One, the research, etc., and two, social interaction model. Okay, I give you some minutes, a few minutes to, simply pick and you classify, Is it okay? So far? Okay. I leave it this way and So what do you think? Let's start with the first model, the RD&D model. What features could you associate with that model? Yes?
Poor access to information.
Poor access to information.
Direct.
Directive. Top-down approach. Prescriptive. Centralized.
Expensive.
Outside experts.
Expensive.
Expensive. Prescriptive. Mentioned.
That's it.
Yes? Okay. And of course, the others are social interaction models. What are they? Teamwork. 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 There is a teamwork going on also on the other one. But a teamwork that is excluding one major player. Okay?
Teacher participation.
Teacher participation.
Variety.
Variety of contributors.
Collaborate.
Teacher participation.
Collaborate.
Collaborative. Yes, collaborative. Of course, responsive to user needs. Teacher participation, flexible. Feedback. Consultative. Yes. So those are, just to increase your better your understanding of the two approaches. Okay. One final or one other piece of information to be added here is that usually a combination of features of each model is more likely. Okay, so sometimes you can combine, as it is done in the curriculum. So there is start with the first model, the RD&D, and then they establish the criteria, the principles, and so on. Then they move on to the social interaction model into asking teachers, supervisors, students, etc. The last model is simply action research. Okay, action research is the last approach type of model for evaluation, which is teacher-driven approach to classroom innovation. Okay. So these are some better ways for doing evaluation. Okay, doing evaluation, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you.